want to get into your journey from ER doc to entrepreneur. I mean, that's quite a shift, quite a pivot. What led to that?
When I was young, I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up. However, it turns out I was way better at kind of the business stuff and math. In high school, I started my first business, landscaping business. I sold it before I went to college. I was always doing stuff like that. I did real estate stuff in college. But medicine's always 15 to 20 years behind. And I could not kind of wait around for that to come out.
That brought about, there's a wild story there because you exited that company twice. Can you tell us the story?
I mean, when we started Well Health, the plan was just let's build the coolest clinic in the world, like all the stuff that we want. And I had a hypothesis at that time that really all of medicine is just a data problem. Like if someone is sick, I just need data about what's going on. The more data, the better.
What were the data points you were collecting for those initial phases of Wild Health?
First off,
your recommendations for entrepreneurs in terms of the things they should do to stay in their prime.
we see this, Lloyd, with entrepreneurs. Like,
Hey, Traction fam, super excited to have Dr. Matt Dawson with us today. From saving lives in the ER to revolutionizing preventative care. He co-founded and exited Wild Health, a genomics-based precision medicine platform, and now serves as the CEO of TruDiagnostic, an epigenetics lab pioneering biological age testing. And today, Matt's going to share how his frustration with sick care model of medicine led him to build an AI-powered, DNA-informed system designed to optimize health before disease shows up. Matt, super stoked to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
thanks, Lloyd. I'm excited about it.
Awesome. So, before we get on to all the cool stuff around extending your lifespan, health span, and all the cool biohacks out that people are debating, I want to get into your journey from ER doc to entrepreneur. I mean, that's quite a shift, quite a pivot. What led to that? What led you to go from an ER doc to genomics and AI-driven health optimization?
When I was young, like I was a child, I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up. However, it turns out I was way better at kind of the business stuff and math and numbers. And in college, actually, it was an economics and finance major. I had this thought at the time, though, that I really just wanted to help people being a doctor. And so I'd kind of set some of that aside. I mean, in high school, I started my first business, landscaping business. I sold it before I went to college. I was always doing stuff like that. I did real estate stuff in college. So always doing like entrepreneurial things and loving the numbers and the finance component. But I took quite the detour of 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency and fellowship, and then practicing a little while, but I came back to it. I just love kind of the alchemy of bringing together people and the numbers and the finance part and kind of building something as a group that adds a lot of value.
The most successful people, at least what we've seen in the past and now going into the future, are all multidimensional, right? If you look at Leonardo da Vinci to like yourself and even, the NVIDIA founder, even Airbnb CEO, he is probably one of the most multidimensional people. He's an art student and was also a bodybuilder before disrupting the hospitality industry. But was there a turning point in the ER that led you to say, you know what, I am going to go into longevity. I'm going to go into optimization.
Yeah. And I think when we think about entrepreneurs, like it's really just about solving problems. Like you see a problem and you like have a burning desire, I've got to solve that problem. And when the ER, the problem that I saw, I love practicing in the emergency department. Like it's such a privilege to see people in kind of sometimes their worst ever moments. It's a very intimate thing. It's a very exciting environment. But the problem I saw is the same people are coming back over and over the same problems. And we're not really fixing anything. And there's like proverb that always reminded me of a little village on a river. And one day someone's floating down, screaming for help. And everybody runs out and they pull the person out of the water. They save their life. Next day, same thing. Someone floating down the river. And on the third day, like maybe we should head upstream and figure out who's throwing people in the river and like go to the root cause. And it felt in the emergency department like I was pulling people out of the river, but all the root causes of what was causing them to be drowning in the first place, we weren't addressing all the basic things. And I knew if I really wanted to make a difference, that was the problem that I saw, is not addressing those root causes. And if I want to make a real difference, I needed to go upstream and figure out what's going on and try to help people. As I was kind of having those thoughts of what am I doing here in the emergency department? Am I really making a big impact? And you are individually, but I wanted to do more there. I started to see a lot of evidence emerging around precision medicine, around genomics and epigenetics, and really being able to treat people in a very personalized way. But the science that I saw, as advanced as that was, it wasn't actually being practiced anywhere. And so as an entrepreneur, like you see this problem, you see see a solution that the science is there for. But medicine's always 15 to 20 years behind. And I could not kind of wait around for that to come out. So I left the academic center of the university and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to practice genomics and epigenetics and really get upstream and help people optimize early and treat them in a very personalized way.
And then that brought about Wild Health. And there's a wild story there because you exited that company twice. Can you tell us the story?
Yeah, it was never the plan. I mean, when we started Wild Health, the plan was just let's build the coolest clinic in the world, like all the stuff that we want. And I had a hypothesis at that time that really all of medicine is just a data problem. Like if someone is sick, I just need data about what's going on. The more data, the better to know what's going on. If they're not sick and they just want to optimize, need as much data as possible. Well, Wild Health, what we built is we said we're going to collect. So to tell you kind of the personal story of it, my grandmother had passed away from dementia, and seeing her go through that, it was a horrible thing. And the doctors really, there was nothing they could really do. And I started reading a lot about that. And I read the book, The End of Alzheimer's by Dale Bredesen. And he talks about the 37 holes in the roof. If you patch all these, you can really, he was having remarkable results of delaying Alzheimer's, of preventing it. But he just needed all this data, like which of these 37 holes it needs to be plugged. And I really started buying into that. And that's when I came up with this kind of data hypothesis that every chronic disease was like that. You just need to have all the data to then prevent the disease from happening. And my mother was worried about her, obviously, because dementia is, there's a heritable component. And I sequenced her DNA. She had this ApoE4 gene that made her several times more likely to get it. And so I went down that route of I'm going to collect all the data I can on her, sequence her DNA, looked at her epigenetics too, tons of biomarkers, wearable data, and then took all of that data, those millions of data points, and came up with the perfect plan to optimize her, what food she should eat, how we optimize her sleep, supplements, exercise. And in 3 months, she lost 40 pounds, reversed her insulin resistance, and told me she felt 20 years younger. We did that to my co-founder's mother. We put her in the same super data-rich program. She lost 80 pounds, got off all her medications for chronic illnesses. That's when we saw this work, and that's when we left the emergency department and started doing this. So knowing that this data is the key, we also realized the human brain is not made to process that much data. So we had to build kind of AI systems to be able to take those millions of data points and make the precision recommendations, because we weren't going to spend tens of hours or dozens of hours with everyone like we did with our mother. Like we'll do it for our mom, but we need a more streamlined way to do this for others. And so it was that AI software we built that a public company approached us and said, hey, we really like that software. We want to scale it. They offered to buy the company. We hadn't done VC. We hadn't done any raising or anything. Initially, we said no. It ended up being a 9-figure offer that we couldn't really say no to. We sold it to them. They ended up losing like 95% of their market cap over the next couple of years. Some activist investors came in. They were having a tough time. And as they were not able to keep their commitments, I didn't want that company to die as they were kind of going down. Didn't want to go down with their ship. So we took it back, kind of righted things there. And by that point, I had realized, yes, this data thing is real, but epigenetics is the most powerful data in the world. Not genetics, but your genetic expression. And so I had acquired a new company and was kind of running it. And so I just stabilized Wild Health, and then we sold it to another company at that point. I found it a better home at that point.
So prior to your realization on epigenetics, what were the data points you were collecting for those initial phases of Wild Health?
Yeah, genetics, first off. So like my mother had that ApoE4, so she's high risk for dementia. But great, she's at risk for that, but what are we going to do about it? So if we want to optimize her diet, for example, she had a VDR SNP, meaning she needs more vitamin D, BCMO, more vitamin A, collagen 5A1 needs more collagen, FADS2 needs more omega-3. So then our AI system would then say, okay, looking at all of these things, the world's perfect food for you is a sardine. It's got an abundance of all of these things. It's a very clean source. And then her other genetics may say you have a specific gene that makes you have an inflammatory reaction to gluten, or you have an MCM6, so you have an inflammatory reaction for milk. We identify superfoods and kryptonite foods from genetics. We'd also do a ton of lab tests as well to see what things you're deficient in. Collect wearable data to how she's sleeping. Is there deep sleep or REM sleep issues? Questions answered, either to answer things that the data is not going to tell you. So all of that data, questions, blood tests, genetics, wearables, anything we can get pulling into an AI engine. So there's a lot of different data. The piece that was missing was the epigenetics, which is what I kind of discovered later.
What were the key differences you found in the epigenetics that made a sort of monumental difference in this data set to drive the outcome?
So when I was still CEO of Wild Health, I was approached by a company called TruDiagnostic, and they were doing a study with Harvard, and they were showing me that study and that data. And first, when I saw it, I was like, they told me about it. I said, no, that's too good to be true. I kind of wrote it off. But then I dug in. I talked to the professors at Harvard who were doing it, looked at the research, and after about a week, I became convinced it was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen in science and medicine. I showed it to my chief science officer, didn't tell him what I think. He came back with the same answer. He's like, this is the most exciting thing we've ever seen in science. And one thing that he said to me at the time is, he's like, I think we've been wasting our time in genomics. It's all epigenetic. epigenetics. And the reason is you're born with a certain genetics, your DNA, that doesn't change, but it only accounts for about 20% of your health outcome. Your DNA is not destiny. The other 80% is epigenetics. It's what you do. It's how you express those genes. So what you eat, how you sleep, what you're exposed to, your stress levels, that turns genes on and off. That other 80%, I didn't realize until I saw this data, you can measure that. So if you can measure that, you can predict nearly anything. So you're probably familiar with a company called Grail that measures 50 different cancers. The way they do that is with epigenetics, DNA expression. Exact Science, Cologuard test, epigenetics. Exact was just acquired by Abbott for $21 billion because with epigenetics, genetic expression, they can diagnose colon cancer. So what this Harvard study was looking at is like, okay, and the reason what that happens, Lloyd, is if you get pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, you start expressing your genes very differently than if you don't have them. So you can find that epigenetic fingerprint of what pancreatic, colon, breast cancer, prostate cancer, what these things look like. So that's why you can identify all these diseases with epigenetics. So in this Harvard study, they were saying, what about every other chronic disease? If you have cardiovascular disease, COPD, chronic kidney disease, chronic liver disease, depression, you start expressing your genes very differently. Why can't we find the epigenetic fingerprint of all of those and basically diagnose any disease? So that's what the study was about, and they got remarkable results. And like when I was seeing that, I was like, I have to be a part of this company and bring this out to everyone.
And that led you to then joining as CEO at TruDiagnostic.
Yeah, they initially asked me to be CEO, and I told them I'm a horrible employee, but if I can own your company, then I'll certainly run it. And so we worked out a deal to acquire. I had learned that I was a bad employee when I was part of the public company. So
all entrepreneurs are bad employees, and every one of my friends who have exited to a large company or a PE, myself included, have not lasted there. So, so that's how it goes. Now, you can change can you change the gene expression? Like, what can you do in that realm?
Absolutely. That's the beautiful thing about epigenetics. You can predict all these things. Like I've become convinced that what we can predict with epigenetics is limited by our imagination and the size of the data set. So be able to predict it. So you absolutely can change it. So if we see, for example, that you're high risk of developing cardiovascular disease, well, also with epigenetics, we can predict a lot of other biomarkers like your ApoB and CRP and things like those. And then those biomarkers can be modified. So once we see that you're at risk of a disease, we know what to do about it. It drives me insane that cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of Americans. No one should ever die of cardiovascular disease. We have great treatments for the things that cause it. We just need the data and to see that someone's at risk for it. So you absolutely can affect epigenetics. We do it every day. Just listening to this podcast, if you are enjoying it and finding it entertaining, your genetic expression is slightly different, like your different catecholamines stuff, than if you think it's boring and you're falling asleep listening to it. So we're constantly expressing our genes differently based on food, all the other factors that we do each day.
Now, I want to shift this dialogue towards entrepreneurs, right, which is all of our audience. And you've been a longstanding entrepreneur like myself. And what a lot of entrepreneurs do is we power through business life, and we're so focused on the business. And burnout doesn't happen all of a sudden; it creeps in very slow, right? And we piecemeal everything on caffeine, carbohydrates, and cortisol, and then we reach a point, and then like we have a crash, or the VC replaces you, or a bunch of other different things happen. And if you compare that to elite athletes, for example, they have a team, a physician-led team of trainer, nutritionists, physicians, you name it, therapists, recovery specialists, to keep them operating in their prime. And what they have a work span of 10 years. And entrepreneurs create all this value, and like burnout, or like at 65, they're barely functional. How have you used some of this and your recommendations for entrepreneurs in terms of the things they should do to stay in their prime?
Yeah. And we see this, Lloyd, with entrepreneurs. Like, so at TruDiagnostic, one of the things you test for is your biological age and your pace of aging, because pace of age is the number one risk factor for every disease. Your pace of aging is kind of the number one thing that, okay, if I had one metric for your health, what is your pace of aging right now? Because it's a big global measure. And entrepreneurs do not score well, usually pretty bad. Brian Johnson, we worked with Brian Johnson a lot. He uses our test, our pace test. He's the anomaly. Like, he's optimized his pace as an entrepreneur. But the things that he talks about, like sleep, he's constantly on that. And that's not something most entrepreneurs do well. So that hard charging mentality, I'll sleep when I'm dead, stress doesn't affect me and bother me, it does. Like, even if you can power through it, stress and lack of sleep, those are the two biggest things that are just killing people's pace of aging and their just health in general. That's what's leading to the burnout.
Now, one would argue, like, people like Brian Johnson, like, had a massive exit. So he has all the time in the world and all the money in the world to optimize himself. I had been to one of his private dinners, and it was very like orchestrated. motivated. A lot of entrepreneurs can't live like that, right? And so where do you recommend they start? You talked about like stress, chronic stress. What are some tests you recommend they do to sort of form these micro habits that have huge compound interest over time?
Yeah. I would push back on one thing you said, which you said they can't live like that. I would say they choose not to live that. And
Yeah.
it's a rational decision. I would say what they're doing is very simple. They're trading life for money, like for getting it. Totally fine. Everyone I think can make their own decision. And as you mentioned, like with Brian, he already got the money and he was doing the same thing. Like you hear his story, he was horribly sick and then he has to exit and then he realized, okay, I now have a certain amount of money. I don't want to trade money for life anymore. So I think it's just a decision we make. Well, I would like to think it's a decision we make around awareness of what's more important to us, money or life later. Now, I get your point. Like entrepreneurs, like, are there things they can do while they're still kind of trading that life for money? There are, to an extent. I mean, the number, I'll tell you a few things. So if we think we're limited by time as entrepreneurs, all right, got it. Well, making the right choices around food doesn't take any extra time. Just to give you an example, looking at my DNA and everything, I gave the example of my mom, but the perfect food for me is sardines. I have 2 cans of sardines for lunch every day. That doesn't take any of my time. I'm hard charging. I'm eating it at my desk, but I'm making that decision that is just way healthier for me than getting fast food somewhere or eating whatever slop.
Uber Eats. Yeah.
Yeah. So little things like that, like designing your life so you're eating the optimal foods. Obviously, if I had to pick one lever, and people aren't going to like to hear this, it is the sleep. And that's a tough one because of the time component.
You're always on, right? Like, I mean, you've been a multi-time founder now, right? You're always on. Your brain is always thinking. It's a very hard thing to shut off when you've got like board members, investors, maybe you're signing a big deal. And I found that with myself when my company was majority acquired by PE, and my wife's been telling me for years to watch these things. And then 2 weeks after the wire hit my bank account, I'm literally in her ER and my lungs collapsed. I had metabolic syndrome for years. So I had to like sort of, okay, I'm like, at least we have money so we can eject and change the environment. Because a lot of us are in this environment where if the environment is Uber Eats and chips in the pantry and stress, your decision making under fire just gravitates towards whatever is easy, right?
Yeah. So there's several things that have kind of recommendations. Like I'll go back to I'll just point again to the food. The fuel you put in your body makes a big difference. Great. That's easy. Exercise, obviously we know that's important, but that takes time. It doesn't have to. Like I just yesterday, my engineering team is on the other wall here. I've got about a dozen engineers. They hung up a pull-up bar and they're having competition who can do the most pull-ups in a day. So yesterday, just for fun, I was going in and out of there. I did 340 pull-ups. I crushed them. I won in case they ask. But like building that in throughout the day, I didn't go to the gym yesterday, but I did 300 pull-ups like between meetings and while I'm talking to the team. But I bought a treadmill for the office. It's right over here to my right, and I have meetings sometimes while I'm walking with the team. So you can get creative and build those types of things in. Now the sleep thing and like always having your mind on, that's an important point too. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's great entrepreneurs. Ray Dalio, if you hear him talk, he goes on and on about how critical meditation was for him. And even though it may take 20 minutes or he meditates an hour a day, the return on investment is massive. Mark Benioff, I'm friends with Mark. Mark started meditating under Sri Ravi Shankar in his 20s, and he credits meditation with so many things like avoiding burnout and his success. So picking up some of the, like, yes, when we go to bed as an entrepreneur, we're thinking about all these problems, but there are skills that we can develop. I mean, 10 to 20 minutes, like right now, download the Way apps, 10 minutes a day could have a massive impact on your sleep and your focus and all these other things. So there are tools and tricks and ways of stacking these habits into our day, I think doesn't have to distract from the entrepreneurial journey and success.
You've said earlier that sequencing your own genome helps solve a lot of personal health issues, right? Is that something you recommend everyone do? And what are some, like, like most entrepreneurs I know and many in our community, fitness is an afterthought. Business is the number one thought, but you are the engine of the business, right? And ultimately what you end up doing is then start gravitating towards supplements, gravitating towards like things like NAD plus peptides. And that's like saying, I got a crappy engine and I'm going to put premium fuel in it. Your engine will just burn through it faster. So where do you start then? Like you recommend, hey, everyone get an epigenetics test, see what kind of food, maybe training that their body can handle, and then bake that in?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples. I'll give you a genetic one and an epigenetic one. When it comes to genetics, so when I first got my genetics, one of the aha moments for me was around fitness and exercise. So at the time, I was doing Ironman training. But what I found in my genetics, 2 things. Number 1, I needed more collagen protein. And number 2, I actually needed to work out less. My recovery is harder for me to recover, which meant I get a bigger stimulus from the exercise I do. And when I reduced my volume in training, my actually my output went up. So that's great. I saved time and I'm performing better in this discipline. When I increased the collagen protein, I quit having all the tendon and ligament injuries that I had before. So knowing that genetically was able to, as you mentioned, our engine, what does my engine need? So I was able to optimize that. And I gained time. I didn't lose time in it. Just a simple tweak on a supplement and then less exercise. I'll give you a good epigenetic example. So my chief of staff here at TruDiagnostic, what she's done to optimize over the last year is she's gotten a true age test, look at her pace of aging, and then she's gotten our true health test, which has about 100 biomarkers to see what's off and what's not.
And that is blood work, or is that the
Yeah.
similar?
It's a little finger stick. You prick your finger, squeeze a few drops of blood on a dry blood card, send it back, and you get your pace of aging, biologic age, and all these biomarkers. So what she's done over the last years, every quarter she'll do that. And based on the biomarkers that are off, she's worked on that. Supplements, changing her food or exercise, just adjusting her routines. She's taken her pace of aging down from normal, which is 1, down to 0.6. So that means for every 10 years, she's aging 6 years. So just by getting the data, again, coming back to data as the main driver of our health, by getting that and adjusting to it and doing that quarterly, she's reduced her rate of aging by 40%. So in theory, like over the next 50 years, she's in her late 20s right now, she'll age 30 years instead of 50 years. So really just getting that data and helping her health epigenetically.
That's fantastic. I think I'd recommend everyone on this who's listening to go to TruDiagnostic and get a epigenetic test and get a biomarker test. That is phenomenal. I've done it for myself. Of course, my wife, who we have in common, has done that herself. And one of the interesting things is the training modality that you discover through it, right? Like what do you respond well to? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So it was the basic thing there of collagen and then just less working out. That was one component. Also, what I found, so right now I'm training, going with a group Kilimanjaro in March. We're going to try to set a world record for like group ascent and time up and down Kilimanjaro. And so for the training for that, I'm also trying to very personalize it to me. So I know those couple things from genetics. I've also seen with my genetics, I respond a little better to endurance than strength work. So that doesn't mean I don't lift weights. I totally do. But even my sets and volumes, instead of like a 5x5, I may do 3x10. So I may do slightly higher reps, and my body just responds better. Like all the pull-ups I did yesterday, instead of like really heavy pull downs, like a ton of pull-ups, I just respond better to that than something really heavy. So minor tweaks like that you can find with your genetics. And then with the epigenetics, I'm getting those biomarker testing that I was talking about my chief of staff, and I look and see, are there certain things around my B vitamins or my vitamin C or like all these other things? Are there phthalates and extra toxins that I'm getting in that I need to like see? I need to put a water filter in my house or things like that. So just that data allows me to keep going. And then non-genetic and epigenetic things, obviously, like heart rate variability. Like I'm measuring that, monitoring that every morning, and I tweak my workouts according to that. I may go a little harder than planned or less intense than planned based on that. So again, to me, it's all about data and tracking those things to optimize.
Definitely. Now, two other things I want to talk about and get your take on: VO2 max testing and training, and then breath work, which we've talked about at length before.
Yeah. So VO2 max, I think, is an incredible, it's maybe the number one metric, like fitness wise, that you could get that tells you kind of your risk of dying. Like the longer you can keep your VO2 max up, the better. It always decreases over time if you're trying to optimize as we get older, but the higher you're starting and the more you work, the lower it does. And how high it is just a pure metric of what you can do. And at some point, we won't be able to walk to the mailbox, but the higher it is, the longer we keep it, the better. I don't think so. I've done VO2 max testing at a facility the most robust way. You don't have to go to a facility though. I like right now in this training I'm doing, every couple months I'll do a VO2 max test, but I do it at home with my trainer, which is ChatGPT. I've got a projects folder that has the climb, has everything, has all my metrics, every workout I log, I put in it. And I just tell it, hey, it's time to do a VO2 max test, design a VO2 max for me based on specificity of Kilimanjaro. So I do it like a 15% incline on the treadmill. And it tells me how and when to increase pace until I cannot go anymore. Measure my heart rate, put the numbers in. It tells me my VO2 max. And I tell you, it's always been within 2 to 3% of what a robust thing. So you can do that at home and track it. And then based on the metrics, I then have it give me once a week a VO2 max training program, 4x4 minutes or 8x90 second, the same amount of rest. And it over the next month or two, it'll train. I'll retest in a couple of weeks. And you do not need a fancy machine or place to go to do really cool VO2 max testing and training.
Now, for somebody who's 35 plus, what's a good VO2 max to aim for? Like,
yeah. So you can easily, anybody listen to this, pull up on your phone, go to your ChatGPT app and say, if I put in your age and say, what is the different percentiles? Lowest quartile, medium, highest quartile, and it'll spit that out for you. What for me, my goal, I have a very specific goal when it comes to VO2 max, is I want my VO2 max to be higher than my age as long as possible. So like right now, mine's about 53 and I'm 44 years old. So I'm in kind of probably the 97th percentile, so to kind of 95th or up where my VO2 max from age is. But everyone is listening because they have their specific age. Throw it in ChatGPT, it'll tell you where you should be, and it'll tell you how to do a workout to test it. My goal is to have it my age lower than my VO2 max as long as possible. I predict somewhere around 50 years old is when I'll hit that curve. I want to keep it higher than that.
You know, it's funny. I've been driving my wife crazy. So our VO2 maxes are similar. And my goal next year, by the end of next year, is to hit 75. And she's like, "That's a Tour de France." She's like, "I don't know how you're gonna do it."
It's amazing.
So, but I mostly train strength. What is that? Sorry.
How old are you?
I am 45. We're same age. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that, like, that is, yeah, cross country skier, Nordic, like Norwegian.
That's precisely what she said. So she's like, "I'm going to film this and I'm going to film your pain and I'm going to be waiting in the ER for you." So it's turned into a fun exercise at home. The other thing is breath work and sauna. Does that help with improving the VO2 max and overall endurance?
Yeah, so probably not to a large degree. So VO2 max, it's one of the reason why it's such a good measure. It's one of those things you can't really cheat on, can't really cram for the test much. It's really kind of work over time, and you really got to train that engine. Sauna is quite interesting. I'm a big believer in sauna. We have a sauna, I do it frequently. If sauna was a drug, it'd be a multi-billion-dollar blockbuster drug. It reduces all-cause mortality, reduces rates of dementia, cardiovascular disease, all these things. And it's pretty simple. You can think of sauna as just exercise. Like, you get your heart rate up, you're sweating. It's a bit of a stressor on you. And there's really cool studies both in strength training and endurance. So they've in endurance, they took these 5K runners and randomized them to sauna after their workouts or not. And they had a really pretty big improvement on their PR times, the ones that were doing sauna, because it's really just extending their workout a little bit. It's a little more stress after they've done that act portion. Strength training too, seen very similar things. You get big boosts in kind of growth hormone and other things in the sauna, those higher temperatures. So it's great for both of those. I love sauna.
And then I hear a lot about the Wim Hof. Have you explored that?
Yeah, so I love breath work. I don't think of it as much as a physical performance booster as a mental. Like, we in our company, I mean, every quarter of our quarterly offsites, we'll do one or two in the morning holotropic breathwork sessions with the entire group, and it's incredible for getting everyone into a space where they can kind of connect very quickly and immediately. People haven't done Wim Hof or there's tons of different holotropic type of breathworks. Fascinating. I originally got into it when I was looking at the guy who created it, Stan Groff. He was doing psychedelic research in the 60s. And then once it got kind of outlawed, he found this kind of holotropic breath work. And looking at some of his original studies, he would do like 300 people in Germany. And when he would record afterwards, percentage of them would get in a mystical state, like kind of seeing God, unity, one with the universe. It was about a similar percentage to taking psilocybin mushrooms. So when we look at the data on psilocybin and all these psychedelics, incredible mental health benefits. And so breath work to me is really a mental exercise more than a physical performance booster. But as we know, you can't really separate those things. If you got a lot going on mentally with depression and other things, you're not going to be physically performing as well either. But I look at it more as a mental boost.
Yeah, and that's where it's most relevant for a lot of entrepreneurs, right? You're under a lot of stress. And one of the things you talked about earlier is keeping a high HRV. What are some things you do in that regard to lower your stress levels, increase the HRV? What is some of the recommended protocols there?
Sleep is the number one thing. Like, that's going to be the number one thing. Obviously, there's some really cool stuff around kind of vagus nerve stimulation. There's a few companies out there, and I've had patients in the past that have had good luck with that. Some of these vagal nerve stimulators to really increase their HRV. Cold can be good for kind of vagal tone and increasing HRV too. One of the things as an entrepreneur I thought of earlier and I didn't say, I'll come back to, think about stress. Who you're around makes a massive difference. Like, when I'm thinking about building a company and like hiring, one of the biggest determinants of, we know success, like getting the right people, but even my mental health and my stress. I'm not going to bring people on the team if they're super talented, if they're going to increase my stress for whatever reason. I don't even need to know the reason necessarily. And HRV, there's an interesting device called the Leaf device, LIEF, that I've worn before. Sometimes it's a little patch. It's a continuous HRV monitor. The cool thing about this patch is you wear it and then it'll alert onto your phone when your HRV drops to a certain level, which is a metric of you're getting stressed. And sometimes what you'll find, some people, like, they'll see when they're doing email, their HRV drops. So this is kind of a cue. Maybe you need to block your email to certain times of the day. But you also notice sometimes in wearing that, you're around certain people and your HRV drops. And it kind of tells you something about what that person is doing nervous system. And so choosing who you're around and work in other places as an entrepreneur doesn't take any extra time to work with someone that you click with and resonate with, but it can be a massive drain on you to have those people around that you don't.
It's like any other toxin, right? Why we tell people not to drink alcohol or put other toxins in your body. Toxic relationships are probably even worse. I was looking at this Harvard study that followed people for 100 years and found that the number one determinant of functional longevity, more than exercise or nutrition, was your circle, right? And if it's people who are draining your energy, your stress levels are through the roof, you're not sleeping well, you're constantly wired, and everything else follows. So that's some great advice there. And oftentimes what entrepreneurs do is we hire for the business goal, but we don't realize that this one person can poison the well and wreck your mental health and everyone else's. And it's just not a financial goal, because if you hire those toxic people, eventually, maybe in the short term, it works out to hit a quarter or two's numbers, but over time, it just drains your whole company.
That study you're talking about is the Harvard study on healthy aging, and it is by far the biggest and best study on longevity ever done. And yeah, over 1,000 people, almost a century, like 80 something years now. And they found the number one. I mean, people think about smoke, how bad smoking is. If you don't smoke versus smoking, adds about a decade to your life by being not smoking. The strength of your social relationships was a bigger impact than smoking or not. It added more years, about a dozen years to your life, having healthy relationships. It's by far the biggest thing, more than exercise, sleep, supplements, peptides, anything else that we've done. It is the number one biggest thing. My mantra, I got a little plaque here that got me from my desk, is I like to do epic shit with people I love. And what I found is if I'm doing it with people I love, it becomes epic. It's just much bigger. You can do more, you can do faster. And so hiring who you really resonate with and love and want to be around is a performance booster.
You can't do epic shit with toxic people. It will drain you, and you'll realize that over time. I've seen this happen over and over again. And actually, the other day, I made a post on Instagram, and it's gone viral, basically on toxic people that you hire, and thousands of comments, tens of thousands of shares. And it just tells you that people recognize these things, but they don't do anything to change their environment. And then they suffer through it, and they look for exercise and nutrition and peptides, which is a topic I want to get into, to fix something that's like a band-aid but won't fix the root cause.
It's just critical, and we forget over and over. So the more I get to talk about it, the better. We need a constant reminder. Like, we just forget how important that is. That we're constantly hiring for skills over values and things like that, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's there's this famous saying that you are the average of the people you surround yourself with, but I think it's the opposite. You are a victim of their bad habits. So if you don't upgrade your circle, you'll just downgrade your life. We've all seen this and been through it, and we kick the can further down the road. I think there's a stat that entrepreneurs take 2 to 3 times longer to fire someone, founders do, than otherwise in a company setting. The other thing I want to dive into, which is a very, very hot topic, is it FDA approved? Is it not? Is it worth taking? The research studies on rats, does it translate to humans? It's peptides, right? Everyone, every single day is asking about peptides. And we're now living in Austin after 15 years of being in the Bay Area. And I think like Austin is probably the peptide capital of the United States. What's your take on peptides? If there are any that you recommended or tried, and what are things you caution on?
There are a lot of peptides that I like. I'll go ahead and say the caution is that most of them, not all of them, most of them are not FDA approved, and it's the source. Most peptides are pretty great when you look at their risk benefit ratio. The real risk comes in like where you're getting them. And even that's changed over time. 5 years ago, it was actually pretty easy to get really high quality peptides from compounding pharmacies, and you still can, but the FDA came out and sent letters and shut a lot of places down and put it in a gray area. So what's happened since it went to a gray area is less reputable folks are doing it because they don't want to be in that gray area. And so you get a lot more folks that are selling things you don't really know what it is. So setting that aside, if you know what you're getting, it's high quality. There are peptides I love. There's great. And a lot of things that people don't realize are peptides. I mean, insulin is a peptide. So there are like FDA approved kind of normal medications. Tirzepatide and the GLP-1s, those are peptides. That's probably going to be the first real kind of longevity drug. We've actually at TruDiagnostic, we've done studies with Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, the measures of semaglutide, Ozempic, and tirzepatide, Mounjaro. And we've seen decreases in pace of aging and biological age. Tirzepatide, the GLP-1 that I like the best, better than semaglutide. And it's been shown to, like, obviously, the weight loss stuff, but even beyond that, setting that aside, really cool kind of anti-inflammatory, neurodegenerative risk reduction, longevity benefits. So that's probably the number one that everyone's talking about. And I think it's got a lot of backlash. A lot of people see it as cheating to lose weight or whatever. But if you know what you're doing with it and you're microdosing, if you're not taking your appetite down where you're losing muscle mass and having bone density issues, it's a pretty cool thing. I mean, I've got most people I've talked to, it's hard to, like, the benefits usually outweigh the risks if they do it right, if they know how to do it and kind of dose it right. I've got both my parents on it. I occasionally will be microdosing with tirzepatide, even though I'm definitely not trying to lose any weight. So that's one big one. Plenty of other ones, but it really depends on what your goals are. If I've got a small injury or like some overuse thing, some niggle, I'm trying to get better. I've had good results with BPC 157. That's another common one. I usually will stack that with a thymosin beta, like TB 500, and I just tend to recover a lot more quickly when I'm doing a BPC 157 thymosin TB 500 stack. There's others. I mean, thymosin alpha, just someone in our office had a bad virus. They need to recover more quickly. You just tend to recover more quickly with thymosin alpha from viruses and things. So MOT SC, that's one with the Kilimanjaro climb that I'll probably do a round or two of when it gets closer to the climb, kind of mitochondrial biogenesis and health too. So there's a lot of love. It just kind of depends on what's the indication, what are you trying to do? There's usually a peptide for it.
I did try tesamorelin. It dropped my visceral. I didn't have significant visceral fat, but it dropped it to like below 0.5. And I've been doing the SLUPP332 pills, which is like a counterpart to MOTS-C, and it improves your endurance. And it's done wonders for me. I dropped, I think, 10 pounds of body fat in the last 3 months, and I'm getting close to single digits. And I normally take a very long time to sweat, but after I started taking this, I just feel like walking around is just I'm sweating, and I'm like guinea pigging some of this stuff based on based on what I see and hear to try it out. And so that's the extent of what I've tried. In terms of like all the biohacks you've seen out there, and like the Brian Johnsons and the Peter Attias and the entire scape talks about, what are your top three that you recommend to people?
Biohack is such a broad term. So we could throw sauna in there. I mean, if we were talking about, if we were to combine it with the basic stuff, like sleep is going to trump most of that. So let's kind of order these. Strength of your social relationships, number one. We've already talked about that. Sleep is right after that. Intense exercise is going to be the number one determinant of longevity. Great. Most people don't really consider those biohacks. If I'm thinking about biohacks, people would probably throw sauna in there, which we already talked about that. That's great. If we want to talk about molecules, for example, I think the GLP-1s, microdosing those, like I've just seen incredible benefit with that. Rapamycin, I really believe in the literature around rapamycin as well. Those are probably some kind of more basic ones that I think, I'm trying to think of things that I think everybody should do, which is a hard thing because I'm the personalized guy. Like, it should be personalized. You need to get data. But creatine, I mean, everyone's talking about that, but it's not sexy, but it is something that I just haven't found anybody that shouldn't be taking at least 5 grams of creatine a day. Things we already talked about, like meditation and breath work, are big. Simple supplements like high dose omega-3s, just for lowering inflammation, improving mood. If you don't already have high omega-3 levels, like my 2 cans of sardines puts me in that category. I don't really need that. Those are some of the things I think about as the most impactful. If I had to think of some that they get a lot of press and are not as impactful, most supplements in general, if you don't have a deficiency in it, I think you're probably not gaining much from it. I like cold exposure. That's a no pun intended, it's a hot thing. The data is not great on cold exposure, though. What I've seen with cold exposure is more of kind of an alertness and kind of mood thing that's good. But beyond that, people talk about it kind of for fat loss and things like that. There's not really great evidence for that. So those are just a few of mine that I think are the best. It's such a broad category, though.
In terms of sleep, though, it's so hit and miss, right? I've tried multitude of supplements, and sometimes you don't know what really works.
And I'm happy to talk about sleep. So sleep's a whole kind of category. So with sleep, and there's some cool brand new things. With sleep, I always like to start data driven. Like, okay, what's the problem? Is it falling asleep? Is it your REM sleep? Is it your deep sleep? So we're tracking, are you waking up too early? Because there's very different things we do for different of those. Like, for example, just talking to someone who's waking up too early and having REM sleep issues, not a lot of REM sleep. That's probably potentially a cortisol issue. So I said, hey, why don't you try some phosphatidylserine? That could work really well for that. So I like to be targeted with sleep. Like, what's the problem? And then we'll come up with the solution. If I had to pick like one supplement that I always wanted, wouldn't do without, it's magnesium. So magnesium L-threonate at night. A lot of people have really good results just taking magnesium L-threonate at night. And that needs to be that form because it crosses the blood-brain barrier better. A couple things. The new and cool, exciting thing that has kind of been new on my radar, I've been looking at the research, is the DORAs, the dual orexin receptor antagonists. So people may have heard of Belsomra or daridorexant, which is Quavic. So those are really interesting. When we think of sleep medications, people think of Ambien or a benzo. Those just knock you out. They don't. And I tell people, like, if I hit you on the head with a hammer and knocked you out, would you call that sleep? Not really. You're just knocked out. And that's kind of what Ambien is. It knocks you out, but your sleep architecture is kind of disrupted. You're not clearing out the stuff from your brain, the toxins and things. But the DORAs, they don't do that. They seem to actually have the same sleep quality or even improvements in sleep quality, and they don't have the daytime drowsiness as much. So the three is you probably hear the most about Belsomra, but it's not my favorite. It has a longer half-life. I like daridorexant. It's a mouthful. The name brand is Quavic. It's Quviviq or Quvivic. Sorry, I mispronounced that one. I like it better because it's got a tighter half-life. It's a shorter half-life, like 8 hours versus the 12 hours or so for Belsomra. And so you get a little less sleep drowsiness. But memory consolidation, which like with Ambien, you have less of that. So you may not consolidate your memories much from the prior day. You actually improved with the DORAs, better deep sleep, REM sleep. I hesitate a little bit talking about it too much because I always feel like when it's like a cheat or a hack, like I'm paying a price somewhere else, I just can't really find it in the literature, like the price that you're really paying. It doesn't have the dependence risk as much. Like if you take Ambien or benzos, people would kind of get dependent on those. You don't have as much of the rebound insomnia, the other ones. It's a pretty cool one that I'm wanting to see more and more research. But the biggest downside, honestly, to the doors is the cost. I had a friend recently write me for a prescription. I was like, I wanted to measure my sleep architecture and stuff. And for like a 30-day supply, it was going to be like $491. Like, without insurance. So it's expensive, but I ended up finding like a good RX, which I could get for like $130. But the biggest issue with those is the cost more than side effects or anything. So if I had to think the coolest, newest thing, it would be those that I'm really watching closely and experimenting with.
I'm gonna look them up right after and see if I can try one of them at least. My sleep, it's not the REM sleep. I always get like REM and deep in the 2 hour range. It's the sleep time, and it's always shutting off because my brains are always wired. It's like 15 years of being an entrepreneur, and I'm always thinking about something, and shutting off is the problem. It's not so much staying asleep.
So the mechanism, it's called a dual orexin receptor antagonist. So what that means is orexin is your wake signal. So if you block that wake signal, it lets you kind of fall asleep more naturally. So that wake signal, that mind racing, like you may have good results with Adora.
I'll give it a try. Now, as we get to the close, I want to take a few questions in rapid fire. Between AI, wearables, genomics, epigenetics, where is all this heading in the next 5 to 10 years? What are you most bullish about?
All medicine should be practiced by AI in the near future. I think that's going to be like a controversial statement. Like, there's no way I would trust a doctor for my health as smart as the LLMs are. So very controversial statement. But to me, the things you just mentioned, it's the combination of those things. So we developed a product that you get all the epigenetic data. So I talk data. That's great. But once you have a massive amount of data, human brain, that's not what it's designed for. LLMs, perfect for it. I'll give you an example. My co-founder, Mike Mallon, he had been taking statins for a while for cardiovascular disease, high lipids, having insomnia, couldn't figure it out. 10 different doctors over a year, they couldn't figure it out. He did our True Health test, all the biomarkers, put that into an LLM with his sleep data and said, hey, I'm taking statins. In seconds, it spit out, he had these like 12 different things were off. We still couldn't make sense of it ourselves, but it could. It basically was like, look, your taurine levels and your betaine, riboflavin, it guessed that he was a vegetarian, which he was. And then it said, if you just probably eat meat or take these couple supplements, you're probably going to solve this problem, because the statins were reducing his GABA production for sleep and messing up his methylation. Took the supplements and he got better. So in seconds with an LLM and the data, he got the solution and now he's sleeping, whereas he just couldn't do it in the traditional path. So to me, it's a combination of AI and feeding it. And AI is only as powerful as the data you feed it. So giving it the right data, massive amounts of data, like from epigenetics, I think that's going to be the future.
It's a very controversial statement coming from a longtime physician, but do you see a world where, I mean, let's say 20 years from now, physicians exist?
So yes, absolutely. Great physician, your wife, I love her. So like, even when I said it, I was like, oh man, I hope she doesn't hear this and get mad at me.
She's all up in the AI world, so like it's fine. I think there's some shared beliefs.
But I think physicians do exist. But what a physician is what changes. If you're a physician and you think that your job, which it was was 10 years ago when Vivetta and I trained. If your job is data collection, data processing with your brain, and data delivery to patient, you're done. You're out of a job. LLMs or AI is way better at that. We didn't go to medical school to be data collecting, data processing, data delivery. We went to medical school to heal people, to help people. So an example of this, I had a friend that called me recently, just diagnosed with cancer. 5 years ago, I would have turned into a data collection machine. I'd ask him a ton of questions, then data processing, then data. I'd tell him like, okay, we should do the next steps. I know that I'm not the best at that. AI is going to be. So what I did is I said, hey, send me everything you have on it. And I already knew what I was going to do. It's like all that, put it into Gemini 3 or ChatGPT 5.1 or whatever my favorite LM was, and let it do all that. And instead, what I got to do is be a compassionate physician friend. And I said, how are you feeling? Have you told your wife? Like, you got told the kids? And I got to really be there for him and give him that connection. And then when I get the LM to give me that data, like I'll deliver it in a compassionate way, but I get to really practice like healing and being compassionate and partnering with him. So the AI is offloading what I'm not great at to let me lean into what I really went to medical school to be. So I think physicians exist. Just how we see ourselves and what we do will be very different in the future.
Definitely. Now, what's one supplement you won't go without?
Yeah, so I said it earlier, which is magnesium, L-threonate. So like if you made me, although now I'm thinking, man, I like my creatine too. But yeah, but sleep is so critical that I think the magnesium at night would be if I had to choose one, and I'm not doing any testing otherwise to see what my levels are.
Most underrated health habit?
I'll say one word, which would be weird and controversial, which is love. Like that's it. Like loving what you do, who you're doing it with. To me, the biggest biohack is stacking all the biohacks with people you love. Like going on a working out outside in nature with people you love. Like it being that's to me the biggest health hack.
3 days ago, I made a reel on that and it's got nearly 500,000 views. So obviously many people believe it, but they don't have it and they aspire for it. One health mistake you see high performers make over and over again?
Yeah, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but it's sacrificing sleep. That's it. Sleep is such a high leverage thing because we know exercise and food are important. But if you don't sleep well, you make bad food decisions. If you don't sleep well, you don't work out well. You get injured more. So sleep is just this lever that makes all the other things work better.
Best $100 you've spent on your own health?
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Well, that's weird. I was gonna say my LLM subscription. That's actually it's $200 a month. I'm on the pro plans of everything. Yeah, that's a tough one. I like a brand new thing. There's a lot less than $100, which I'm really liking, is an inspiratory muscle training device. I've just got in my car. That's just a brand new one that I'm really liking.
How does that work?
When you were talking about breath work earlier, one of the things I thought didn't say is breath work is not really for performance. I think it is mental, but breath work is such a broad term. Inspiratory muscle training device where you breathe in, it's got a lot of resistance. So 30 reps of in as hard as you can, training the diaphragm and those muscles. Then you breathe out passively. 30 reps of that kind of twice a day. It's been shown to really kind of increase performance because you're able to move so much more oxygen efficiently. So it's a kind of a $20 machine. You get something you can get on Amazon.
I'm going to buy it. And lastly, as we close out, what does your daily personal look like for optimal energy, clarity, and resilience?
It's got to get a good night's sleep before. I've got to get a good workout in the morning or I go nuts. And that's usually an ideal scenario of that is something high intensity and with other people. And a game is the best.
In the morning, first thing?
In the morning, early. If I don't, I'm just thinking about it all day if I haven't got it done. And then doing epic shit with people I love. Like that's to me, that's what I love to do. And that's what makes me the happiest. And I just feel the healthiest.
This has been a fantastic conversation. I think one thing you pointed out, doing first thing in the morning, I think there's some science behind it, is boosting morning cortisol, right? Sets you up sort of lower cortisol in the night and you naturally sort of have a good rhythm.
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the data, like your strength and everything else is actually best in kind of the early afternoon. And so if I really was optimizing for just that, I may do that. But for me, mentally, getting it done in the morning, knowing that I've done it, I like that feeling of like a little bit of fatigue. It settles me down, like my ADHD and everything else. So just for me personally, the morning is really critical.
And it's done. It's out of the way and you're calm for the rest of the day. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. But this has been a fantastic conversation and our subscribers are going to love this one. Thank you.
So much fun. Thanks, Lloyd.